So thank you. I really appreciate you being here. I appreciate your attention. In this session, I'm going to be exploring a question. And the question is, what is the relationship between race, consent, and contact improv? I'm not going to be providing definitive answers. I'm not going to be even exploring all aspects of that question because it's a huge question. So I'm going to talk about a few particular things, and then we're going to do an activity. So during this presentation, I invite you to, in the back of your mind, hold these questions. So why would this topic be important to me? Why might this topic be important to you? And what's the value of examining this question and the questions within it? What's the value for the CI community at large? And lastly, what's your personal relationship to issues of race and people of color? We all made videos, and I know that not everyone was able to watch all the videos. So some of you may have seen it, some of you may not have. In my video, I shared a bit about my process of noticing that my kinesphere, which is my personal space, that my kinesphere was not being respected when I was out in the world. I noticed that it was being entered by people, and sometimes even aggressively transgressed without my consent. And sometimes it was even without acknowledgement of the people that were doing it, kind of like, So I started noticing it when I was walking on busy streets in the city. And I started noticing this thing where when there's a bunch of people and there's not enough room for everyone and somebody has to shift so that people don't bang into each other. What I started noticing is that very often white folks, and especially white men, wouldn't shift, and I was the one that would have to shift. So I started playing with it. I started not shifting and seeing what was happening. And there were a bunch of things I noticed. Sometimes people would be surprised, like, oh. Sometimes they would even be shocked. Sometimes they would shift. Sometimes they wouldn't shift and we'd have a collision, and then they would be really shocked. And then what I started noticing is that this dynamic was also happening in clubs. I was going out dancing a lot in clubs, watching live bands or DJs. And I started noticing that there was a scale of how much it happened depending on the racial makeup of the crowd. So I noticed in clubs where the crowd was predominantly white, this would happen a lot. It would happen when I was simply standing, watching a band, or if I was waiting to buy a drink at the bar, or if I was moving around the club. It would happen on the dance floor as well. People moving into my space, expecting me to move out of the way instead of them moving. And I noticed then in clubs where there was a more diverse mix, that it happened much less. And then the most striking experience was in Brooklyn one night in a bar where 99% of the people there were Black, and this bar was jam-packed, like packed to the gills. I noticed the whole time I was there, not one person actually banged into me or bumped into me. It was pretty incredible. And that I noticed there was a subtle way where people negotiated the consent of space. And it was through like subtle movement, it was making eye contact, and that people were very generous in terms of shifting and moving, so people didn't have to bang into each other. So I also, in my video, talked about 2 myths that I think can be helpful to look at in the realm of the contact improv world. The first one is the myth that racism is intentional, that when racist things are happening, it's because someone is going, I don't like that group, or something to that effect. I think that group is this way or that way. And so how that myth plays out is, we all want to believe, or most of us, I can't speak for everyone, most of us want to believe we're a nice person, we're a good person. So if I'm a good person, how can I be racist? I'm not out there thinking bad things about people and wanting to hurt people. And what is left out of that is that there's a racist system that we're all living in. And because we've all been brought up in this system, we have internalized all sorts of biases that we're mostly not even conscious of, and that these things play out in our everyday lives, like what I was talking about on the sidewalk and in dance clubs. So because we all want to believe we're nice people, if someone confronts us about something or even kindly brings something up to us, it can be threatening to look at it. It can be scary to go, oh, maybe that thing I said was a microaggression. Maybe it was racist, because then that threatens our sense of I'm a good person. And that can feel difficult. The other myth is the myth that there are communities that are egalitarian, where everyone's equal. And I think that there's a myth about that in terms of the contact community, that, on the dance floor, we're all equal. We're all there to dance. It's very loving and beautiful. And that, again, disregards the racist systems that we're all operating in. And another problem with that is that when people start to speak up about it and other people don't want to let go of that myth, what they're doing is they're denying the reality of systemic racism, and it denies the reality of people of color. So for me, it makes it difficult for me to feel fully self-expressed in a safe way in a space that doesn't have room for my reality. So something else I noticed in the days leading up to this symposium, as people were lovely and sending in emails introducing themselves, I started noticing that a lot of people were introducing themselves as white. And at one point, a whole bunch came through, and I noticed an actual sensation in my body. I noticed a kind of a sinking feeling in my stomach. It was like, oh my goodness, there's a lot of white people here. So it made me think about the demographics of this symposium. And that brought up questions for me. I don't have answers, but it brought up questions. Why is this so? And the sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, it has to do with discomfort, meaning a lack of comfort. And it's the discomfort that I experience being a visible minority. I'm going to share a little story with you. My grandparents are from Barbados, and a few years ago, my sister and her daughter, we traveled together to Barbados, and it was lovely. We had many adventures, and one night we went to an event on the other side of the island, and we had to take 2 long bus rides. And on the way back, it was quite late at night, we were on the bus, and the bus was quite full. And at one point I looked around and I realized, oh my goodness, everybody on this bus is Black. Everybody looks like me in a particular way. And this feeling of comfort settled through my system, through my body. It was this sense of, And it was because I live in a world that's predominantly white and I travel in a lot of white circles. There's a way in which I'm used to that slight discomfort and don't even notice it a lot of the times. And so on that bus in Barbados, it gave me a chance to go, oh, this is what it's like to be in a different space, to be in a space without a majority of white people. So I have a friend, a white man, and when I came back, I was telling him this story about this. And he said, oh my goodness, That sounds horrible. I would have been so uncomfortable if I was on that bus. And I said, welcome to 90% of my life. For 90% of my life, I'm that one or two people in that larger group of people who look different from me. Back to the video. So those of you that were able to watch the video may have noticed there were some costume changes. And at the end of the video, I suggested to viewers that they could try an experiment, that you guys could try an experiment. And notice if you had any different responses to the different iterations of my appearance in the video. So in a minute, I'm going to ask Kathleen to do a screen share with some images. And while she gets ready to do that, I'm going to offer you a suggestion. So when these images come up, notice your body sensations. Notice if you have any visceral reactions. And also notice what thoughts, ideas, and other responses come up for you as you see these images. And like I said, this is an experiment. And it can be useful information because it can be a clue to some unconscious implicit biases that you might have and not even realize are there. And let me just say that I really believe that because we've grown up in racist systems, that we're all racist. It's not about, oh, this group is and this group isn't. We all grew up in this soup. We all absorbed this stuff. And so I think the question is not, am I racist? But the question is, am I anti-racist? Am I doing the work to excavate these things, to uncover these things so I can bring them into my consciousness and make conscious choices instead of unconscious ones? So, so notice as you watch the images. So, which book cover would you reach for if you were going to buy this book? And which book cover might make you feel uncomfortable? And which of those images would make it easier for you to take in the message? I'm going to talk super briefly about the ethnic diversity in Toronto, which is where I've grown up and where I live. According to the most recent stats that I could find from the 2016 census, 51.5% of the population of Toronto are visible minorities. For those of you who go to jams in Toronto, think about when you go to jams or events or regional jams, do you see that same ratio of diversity reflected in the people at the jams? So I know people are from different places in the world. I'm also going to tell you the stats I looked up for New York City. Again, from the 2016 census, 44.6% of the New York City population is white, 25.1% is Black, 27.5% is Hispanic Latina, 11.8% is Asian, and 0.4% is First Nations. So again, are these numbers being reflected in CI events in North America? I know there are people from different places in the world. If you're curious, you can Google it and see what the stats are for where you live, where you go, where you dance, where you practice, and look around and ask yourself those questions as well. Okay, so back to the video. Also in the video, I talked a bit about the Person of Color Jam that I've been facilitating for about 2 years here in Toronto. And what I shared was something I discovered when running the jam, which was a surprise to me. So what it is it's about who came to the POC jam and who didn't come to the POC jam. So what I found is that the people who came to the jam were, for the most part, like 95%, they were people who rarely, if ever, went to mainstream jams. The people of color that I regularly see at the mainstream jams rarely came to the POC jam. So I don't know why that is. And I know somebody has talked about doing anonymous surveys. So maybe I'll do a survey. I think that could be interesting. But what I do know is that the people who came to the People of Color Jam, so thanks. So what they said is that they came to this jam, they were so excited to see it existed, and they came to the jam because they were reluctant to go to mainstream jams for a few reasons. They were worried that they wouldn't fit in, they were worried they would be rejected, that people wouldn't want to dance with them. They talked about feeling discomfort in a majority white space, and so not feeling comfortable to do contact in that kind of space. They talked about not wanting to have to deal with microaggressions while they were wanting to dance. And some people told me they also don't feel safe when they're dancing with people if they don't know their politics. I'm inviting you to participate in an exercise. It's an exercise in a breakout group. So this is an exercise where I'm attempting to simulate a power differential. And for sure, there are already a whole bunch of power differentials in the group of us here. But for this exercise, I'm setting up a particular scenario for us to have an experience and see what comes up from it. And I'm going to describe it to you first, so that if you're concerned it might be too triggering, you can choose to not go. You can choose to opt out and not go into the breakout room. And it's going to be in breakout rooms with groups of 4. And that way, if someone decides to leave a breakout room, there's still going to be 2 to 3 people left. So you're not going to be alone, hopefully, in a breakout room. And I want to remind you that when you're in a breakout room, you're not trapped. If you're in the breakout room and you decide to leave, you have the control to do that yourself as well. So the exercise frame is this. Once you go into your breakout rooms, divide into 2 groups. One group is A, one group is B. So I'm going to ask you to do this fairly quickly so that there's time for the exercise and then time to discuss afterwards, because I don't think there's going to be time for us to harvest this as a large group. So divide into A's and B's. This frame is also up in the chat too. So A's have some permissions that B's don't. A's are allowed to keep their sound unmuted. A's are allowed to move in and out of the camera frame as they please. And A's are allowed to look directly into the frame, into the camera. So B's need to keep their sound muted. B's must stay within the frame of the camera. And B's are not permitted to look directly. B's must look only indirectly. at the screen. So this is only a minute long. It's a minute exercise. And in this minute, once you've divided into groups and once you've set your microphones, the suggestion is to have a consensual dance. Then we're going to switch. A's and B's are going to switch, reset up their microphones, and again have a 1-minute dance. And then there's going to be time in your breakout group to talk about what that was like and what, if anything, came up for you around it. Also, when you're in the breakout room, Vivek is going to be sending text messages in. And I don't know if any of you have seen them. They come up differently depending on what device you're on, computer, tablet, or phone. But it's, for computers, it's a little thing that's going to come up at the top. And it's going to last, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 seconds. I'm not so good with time, but it doesn't last very long. But they're going to be simple prompts. It's going to be a prompt to, you know, get your decision done, who's A and who's B. Going to be a prompt to set your microphones. Going to be a prompt to start, so that you have the 1-minute timing, and then a prompt to switch.
Leslie, my friend?
Yes.
There's a couple of people asking, what does consensual dance mean?
Ah, that's a good question. You'll have to work that out. Yeah. I'll leave it at that. So I see we're starting to come back. Because of time constraints, we're not going to have a group harvesting, but what we are going to have is a dance break, a mini dance break. So in a minute, Kathleen's going to put on some music, and as a way to shake off the roles that you were just in, we're going to have a little dance break. You can dance sitting, you can dance around, you can lie down, you can breathe, you can sit and watch, you can do whatever you want. And Kathleen's going to play music for about a minute and a half. And then we're going to come back and finish the rest of this presentation.
Darling, it's been a long, long, lonely winter. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun, here comes the sun, and I say it's all right. Little darling, the smiles are returning to the faces. Little darling, it seems like years since they've been there. Here comes the sun, here comes the sun, and I say it's all right. Is slowly melting. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been clear. Oh, there goes the sun. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right.
Thank you. Thank you for the tech support, and thank you for your willingness to join in this experiment. It occurs to me that if there's things that you'd like to share about your experiences, we could do it through email, or what's the other way it could be done? Through the Google Doc? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't want you to feel like you've just had an experience and then there's no other way to share it with the bigger group. So perhaps the next symposium. Okay, so now what? Well, Sasha talked about the structures that support queer power in their geographical area and how that affects who is present in the spaces. That's something I was thinking about. Kathleen also shared about the time it takes her and possibly other neuroatypical people to process touch and how that impacts their ability to process consent and manage it. That got me thinking, is there perhaps a parallel process for people of color to negotiate all the extra layers in our society? And so how to process touch and situations and consent? I don't know. As I said, I'm not offering answers, bringing up questions that are coming up for me. Also, in Raithia's video, she talked about the effect of trauma, well, and in her presentation. She talked about one of the things that can happen is people lose the ability to focus in it and understand the fear in their own bodies and how that impacts people's ability to negotiate consent. So I was thinking about that kind of underlying level of discomfort that people of color can carry in the world. And how does that impact our ability to go, oh, my spidey senses are telling me something, when my spidey senses are often telling me something. So it's kind of like a norm for me and perhaps for others. Are these things happening in CI spaces? And if they are happening, are we aware of them? And if we're not aware of them, how can we even begin to address them? The last thing I wanted to mention is a term called white fragility. And I'm not going to give a big definition here, but I also will post some things in that place where we can post it. I'm going to post some articles. So it's again, it reminds me of Raithia talking about us having the ability to withstand discomfort, us having the ability to stay in an uncomfortable situation or to stay with our own emotional discomfort or our own emotional pain. So when I talked about that myth of that racism is intentional, and so if I'm a good person, I'm not racist, the idea that if someone then brings something to my attention, if I'm not able to withstand that discomfort, if I'm not able to look at myself and feel the discomfort of, oh my goodness, yes, I can see that I've been saying or doing this, and I can see how that has been impacting other people. That can be really painful. So if we can start to have these difficult conversations and withstand the discomfort, if we can make a space where we can, come together and start to have these conversations and be willing to see all of our own isms, not just racism. There are many isms. Well, if we can do that, I feel really hopeful that we can do the work of being not, I'm not racist, but I'm anti-racist. We can do the work of dismantling the systems that we're being impacted by.
Amazing. Leslie, thank you so much. Can we all unmute our microphones and offer Leslie some gratitude?
Thank you so much, Leslie. It was such an informative video.
Leslie.
Thank you.
Leslie.